Christopher Booker, let's go back to this question. Is anti-EU rhetoric nationalistic or is it common sense? I mean, do you accept that you're a narrow nationalist, a little Englandist? And
certainly not. I'm very much the opposite. I'm a great believer in intergovernmental cooperation. What I'm not a believer in is sucking away all the powers of national governments, which have their own...
It's not sucked away, it's made with decision-making
in the European Union. Passed away voluntarily.
OK.
Yeah, well,
let's hear him out.
Without the aid of referendums.
Let's hear him out. Let's hear him out.
Do you want to have a...
No, I'm sorry. I want to hear the rest of Christopher Booker's answer, then you can come back on it. Christopher Booker, please.
Obviously, the answer, I mean, it's a good question, and those are sort of two ends of a spectrum, and obviously the answer is a mixture of those and other factors. One of the things which I've been writing about this in the Sunday Telegraph in my column for about 20 years now, in a fairly obsessive way. The reason why I got drawn into it was because I was becoming aware through hundreds of letters from readers of the devastating avalanche of regulation that started really to become very evident. Doesn't matter what kind of business you run.
Okay.
Around 20 years ago, it became worse and worse. So the real reason why I verge on the common sense end of that, and I'm certainly not a nationalist, is that the thing that we're talking about, it doesn't work, this system of government, and it causes an enormous amount. Look at our fishing industry, look at our farming, look at all the areas which the EU regulations, often made worse, I must say, by our friends in Whitehall.
Let me briefly go to Nigel Farage first. You call yourself the UK Independence Party, but can the UK ever be truly independent in the modern globalised world?
Oh, look. Economically, we're interdependent. Of course we are. And we're living in a global economy, and our main economic argument is that Europe is holding Britain back globally, and it's stopping us doing business with other parts of the world.
But we are very small compared to China and India and the United States. Are we going to be able to pull our weight on our own, a little country off the northwestern coast of Europe?
At the moment, in terms of world trade, we have no voice at all, because we're represented by the European Union. So I would argue, as G8 moves to G20, there's lots of room for Britain to have a voice. On the political side of it, independence means the ability to vote for people that make your laws. But the question sort of implies, well, are there some really unpleasant people who are against the European Union? The answer, of course, is yes. You know, I mean, Sinn Féin IRA are opposed to the European Union. We've got Mr Griffin, who you might have heard of. He's opposed to the European Union. Equally, those that support the European Union, well, people like Oswald Mosley were great believers in the European Union. Several National Socialists, going right back to the German period, were believers. So both sides of the argument may have some bad people that support them and are on board. I think that for Britain, what we're advocating is common sense, because what we're saying is we want to trade with our European neighbours. We want to cooperate with them. We don't want to be governed by their institutions. And that is common sense.
You can't define people in just in terms of one side, common sense or nationalism. I agree with you on that point. But we cannot simply go out as this kind of mythical Great Britain these days and make our case. Very interesting. I think William Hague got a bit of a lesson when Hillary Clinton said, if you start moving yourself away from Europe, you're going to have really no interest in the United States. We want a strong Europe that is a good ally of the United States, a good and critical ally of the United States. And Christopher, your point about all the regulations, they came primarily when Margaret Thatcher signed the Single European Act. Why? Because she wanted free trade across Europe. And that meant you had to have regulations across Europe. You don't want to buy pharmaceuticals that haven't been tested because they're being imported. You don't want building materials that are going to fall down. You've got to have agreements on all those. And of course, it meant regulations. But there's a much bigger picture we keep forgetting, and that is the picture of these 27 countries actually beginning to work together voluntarily for a stronger Europe, and we've got to keep that in mind. And that's where the nationalists keep opposing it, because they'd rather be on their own than to work together.
Even if you're not a kind of BNP type person, even if you're not one of these people that's, you know, virulently nationalistic, do you accept that there are some things that people quite like about this country that the EU doesn't seem to have very much sympathy for?
Well, I absolutely think that there has been overregulation at times. I won't argue that at all. I mean, there has to be some change, and I want to see some reforms in the European Union. But that is true of all levels of government for me, local, national and supranational. And I want to see those reforms carried out by people who are working within the system, not trying to pull out.
But Peter, we can reform national government by voting for different parties at general elections that form our government. The biggest difficulty with European law is that once something is a European law, there's nothing the voters can do at a subsequent general election to change any of it. But I mean, that's the democratic deficit, isn't it?
But there is through the European Parliament.
No,
the point about the European Parliament
because the Parliament
and working together, the point is about...
No, Peter, but as you well know, the Parliament may have increased powers of scrutiny, but it doesn't have the ability to propose laws or to propose the change of laws.
more and more co-decision.
Well, that's I'm sorry, that's not the same thing.
We're talking about a different system of government.
This is a different argument, though. We had this argument about democracy before. What I'm after
quite important, though, isn't it?
Indeed, but we had it before. What I'm after is whether you oppose the EU because it's not British or whether you oppose it because it's not democratic.
That doesn't work.
Both. And we're talking about the not British part of it.
Of course it's not British. I mean, look, Britain is, of all the countries in Europe, we are the one with the biggest presence across the globe. We've got the language, we've got the relationship through the Commonwealth with huge parts of the world, not to mention America. I wish we didn't follow their foreign policy as often as we did, but we've got great global reach. We don't need to be part of government from Brussels.
Running out of time on this half. Robert Evans, last word from you. Half a minute left.
Well, the example that Peter was saying about, Crystal was saying about things being sucked away and everything. I mean, the key issues of the day, and Peter mentioned them earlier on, energy policy and how we address climate change. There is absolutely no way one country, the UK independence on climate change, completely hopeless. We've got to work with the other countries, and if we didn't have
India?
We've got to work with these. Yes, collectively, Europe of 27 countries together can address climate change and say to China, say to India, folks, let's work with you.
I'm going to wind you up now. We'll take a short break. We'll be back in a few minutes for more of this topical debate. Stay with us.